One of the characters with the greatest histories in the Warhammer Fantasy Battle range was Lord Kroak, the Slan mummy that Games Workshop is going to be re-releasing. And when they dropped that article on Warhammer Community showing the pictures of how just out of control and blown up he looks now, I thought it might be good to go back and relearn the history of Lord Kroak, because I had remembered when Lizardmen in 7th edition or 6th edition had come out, I'd flipped through the army book and thought, oh, this is kind of interesting, but I hadn't really given too much thought to the Slan or the race of the Lizardmen. I thought they were just kind of generic blue dinosaurs. The more I learned about them and their culture and the history of the Warhammer world and their role that they played, the more interesting they were. So let's take a look at the great venerable Lord Kroak, defender of Itza and the deliverer of Itza. He is said to have been the first of the Slan mage priests that was spawned by the Old Ones, and the eldest of what was known as the First Generation. The Old Ones taught Kroak how to use the winds of magic and how to unwind the threads of time, and it's written that Lord Kroak and his peers were the ones that were later to teach the first ancestors of the elves how to use magic. So Lord Kroak has been around, he's seen it all, and when the great catastrophe happened, in which the poles of the world, the stargates through which the Old Ones traversed the stars, when they collapsed and chaos bled into the world and the first incursion of chaos came, Lord Kroak unfortunately lost his life. But his indomitable spirit would not concede defeat, and he became the first of the relic priests. So what happened was Lord Kroak, his body was flown far and wide, and his skink attendants were so mournful and so devastated. They went out and they collected all the little body bits of their froggy priest, and they brought him back to Itza, where they had wrapped him in resin-soaked bandages. And because the spirit in Lizardman lore is said to stay near the body, his spirit was so strong that it returned to where his mummified body was. They crafted him a golden death mask that they would imagine he was looking out at the world. And even though he could no longer communicate with his people, his spirit was so strong he was still able to use magic to effect some kind of change and influence on the world around him. In times of need, a relic priest is brought forth from the hidden crypts to enact once more what was known as the Great Plan of the Old Ones. So when he wasn't really needed, they would keep him in the crypts where he would be nice and safe, he'd be close to all of his favorite things. And when the times arose, he would be brought out. Imagine that you're some Empire or Bretonnian crusader that is fighting an army of these terrifying dinosaur people, and all of a sudden you see this floating frog corpse mummy on a stone palanquin just floating across the field, shooting lightning bolts everywhere. I mean, it must have been really crazy. And now that I see the new model compared to the old Games Workshop model, it blows my mind. Look how simple the old model was. Look at these lines and the simplicity of the sculpt. I mean, it was done in metal first, so it was very weighty. I remember a friend of mine at my local club had one of these models, and he never painted it. It's so funny because he said, oh, I don't want to, he's the most important character in my Lizardman army. He had an entirely painted Lizardman army. It looked pretty good, but his Lord Kroak was bare metal. He wouldn't even prime it. And he said it was because he didn't want to get it wrong. So he'd rather not even try it. He'd rather not even attempt to paint the model. And I think that's too bad, because it was such a cool model. You don't really see it in anyone's collections, even Lizardmen collectors, especially in the later editions when they brought out the bigger dinosaurs. A lot of people didn't want to play the old mage, the old Slan priests. So I don't remember seeing them very much, but I do really like that old model. He's just sitting there, he's just chilling, and it looks almost creepy how simple and bare bones he is. Now let's take a look at the new model. So I'm on the Warhammer community website now, and we're taking a look at it. It says, this magnificent model reflects Lord Kroak standing as one of the strongest wizards in all the mortal realms. He's still an ancient mummified frog priest, but they've really given him a lot of new details, and they've upgraded his palanquin. They've totally pimped it out and given it the Stargate Event Horizon spinning disc contraption. It's just mind-blowing how much they've packed into this model. It would have been cool if they released this earlier with the Stegodons and the big dinosaurs and the Carnosaurs. That, I think we would have seen Lord Kroak a lot more on the tabletop. Alright, let's read the article. The events of the Broken Realms are so cataclysmic that they threaten the great plan of the Slann, and Lord Kroak is roused from his contemplation to intervene directly. So I like how even though everything in the old world got obliterated and dusted, Lord Kroak had managed to continue to exist somewhere in space. Even after all this time, Kroak only seems to have grown in power. This is represented in your games with a new war scroll, but you'll have to wait a little longer before we can tell you more about that. There are lots of familiar design cues for fans of the classic model, like the ivory horns and trailing vines on his palanquin. Yeah, I do remember the horns on the old palanquin. And there are plenty of new details to take in as well. The broken rings surrounding the entire model allow it to appear to hover without a clear stand, and to recall the crowning detail of the Realm Shaper engine at the same time. I believe the Realm Shaper engine was that giant disc-looking terrain piece. The kit also gives us the option to leave his ornate metal headdress off. You gotta admit, he's looking pretty good for his age. While we can't spill the beans about his role in the epic saga of the Broken Realms quite yet, it's fair to say that you should grab Battletone Seraphon and start collecting Seraphon set. Don't forget there's another one just for skinks, so that Lord Kroak has an army to lead into battle when he descends soon. No release date, no date for pre-order, just teasing you with pictures and a little bit of fluff. And looking at the pictures, I really like his helmetless, his maskless face. He looks just like a Jim Henson Muppet come to life, like something from Dark Crystal. It's cartoony, but I mean, there's just something so interesting about this face. I really dig it. I love the use of turquoise all over this model. The palanquin itself being a dark gray, almost black. I think it's a good design choice rather than the light stony gray. It allows the colors to pop up a lot more. Look at the turquoise on the back of the palanquin, that design of the serpent at the top. There are so many different shades of that turquoise where it gets darker and lighter, and sometimes it looks a little bit more blue, and sometimes it looks a little bit more green, like near the head and towards the middle of the body. It's just going to be so much fun to paint this guy. And yeah, I mean, the masked head does look very intimidating. It's just so big with that huge crest, but his maskless head, there's just something about that expression that I really, really dig. And you can see he's got a little skink attendant and a bunch of snakes that are chilling with him. So, man, I think they're going to retcon some of this, make it so that he's not really dead like he was in Warhammer. He was a mummy in Warhammer. His spirit was gone, and it was only suspected that he was still somewhere around when you would bring his mummy out. But it wasn't like a dreadnought where people were actively talking to Lord Kroak. They would bring out his mummy and pray that he could do something to help, and sometimes he did, and sometimes it wasn't sure what was going on. The lore of Lord Kroak in Warhammer Fantasy was so interesting because you weren't ever sure what he could do, and sometimes his magic was just so amazing and mind-blowing, and sometimes it was a lot more mysterious. Right now it seems like, oh yeah, he's awake and he's alive, and he can communicate directly with his followers. So a little bit of that mystery is gone there. But this palanquin with all of the broken rings, the different gemstones, I mean, it's going to be so much fun to paint. When I thought, what was that Slanesh big model, the Persian looking one that came out with, and I just said, there's just so much to look at. It's overwhelming. This is overwhelming in more of a good sense. I think everything ties in together with the leaves and the stone itself. The design really looks like the old school lizardmen and the Incan Mayan design. It really evokes that feeling. I'm glad they're going with that. They're saying, Games Workshop is saying, I don't know if we should stray too far from what we're doing. The lizardmen were always kind of working, so let's just kind of pivot back towards that. I do hope they're going to update some of the core kits, like the cavalry. Those guys just look so cartoony and so early 90s. They could do a lot better with that now, especially with Lord Kroak coming. Everybody's going to want to get this model and they're going to look at their lizardmen army and think, man, what is going on? I got to start buying some third-party stuff. No, Games Workshop, this is your lizardmen. The Seraphon are your babies. They're your IP. Give them something interesting. Give them new cavalry. Give them new models. And I think people will be super happy with collecting a Seraphon army. I hate saying that, Seraphon. To me, they're always going to be the lizardmen. Blue dinosaur dudes. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video. And stay tuned. I have more Warhammer Quest Cursed City stuff coming out. And just a whole bunch of videos. Bretonnian army breakdown. There's a lot. Thanks for watching. If you want to support the channel, the simplest thing you can do is hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. And if you'd like to support my channel in a more substantive way, you can buy some of my merch or check me out on Patreon. See you in the next video. Latest, players!